2 is a follow-up to 2014's The Equalizer, which was based off of a TV show of the same name from the 80s. This time around, former CIA agent Robert McCall, the Equalizer, is working as a Lyft driver by day and helping people in need by night. But when someone close to him is murdered, he must return to his old ways and hunt down the person responsible. So The Equalizer 2 delivers more of the bloody R-rated action that we got in the first film, and it solidifies Antoine Fuqua as one of the last straight-up old-school action directors working today. Before I get started and tell you my full thoughts on it, if you're a movie fan that loves to talk movies with others, join us down in the comment section. Tell me your take on the original Equalizer as well as The Equalizer 2 and R-rated action movies in general. What you have to say matters. We'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. With that said, let's get started talking about the good. For me, the absolute best thing about this movie is that it is a throwback to 80s and 90s action thrillers. It's a little bit slower paced. It uses tension rather than big CGI spectacle to kind of build the excitement in the sequences. It uses old school action movie logic, and we'll get into that a little bit later and how that's negative at certain points in time in the film. And it is unashamedly graphic in the violence, especially coming after watching Skyscraper a week ago, which nerfs down all the violence. This movie is bloody, people are getting sliced up, and it's a little bit uncomfortable at certain points in times in the movie because it can be a little bit smutty in some of the action and the context under which things take place. There's sequences where women are assaulted by men, and it is an old school action movie. You don't get a lot of movies these days that have this type of action and violence and graphicness to them, getting wide releases. Along those same lines, it has another memorable third act. The first movie has a memorable third act and sometimes criticized third act in that some people call it Home Alone at Home Depot or something like that. This movie finds a way to take the good aspects of that sequence and kind of remove, I think, a little bit of the cheese out of it, even though I enjoyed the third act in the first film. But it gives a new context for a big, exciting, unique action sequence that's not big CGI spectacle, but still exciting and builds on what has come before in the film. Another thing is that this movie might be a little bit deeper than the first film in that it establishes some pretty clear themes about loss, regret, moving forward, finding purpose. So it gives a little bit of extra emotion and depth to some of the sequences that happen in the film. Also, Fuqua does a great job of crafting villains that you love to hate, whether they're the ones that are just kind of in these little side stories that happen or the main villain that's established throughout the film. You hate these characters and want to see Denzel Washington go off on them and make them pay for what they've done. In particular, the main villain in it, they kind of craft a story that as it kind of builds and you learn what's kind of going on, you start to hate some of these characters more and more and more and really want to see them equalized. And of course, the glue holding this movie together is Denzel, who is endlessly watchable and just owns the screen. And so much of that comes from the fact that he can so easily transition from charming, charismatic Denzel to intimidating, physically scary Denzel Washington to calculating Denzel Washington to fatherly Denzel Washington to broken Denzel Washington. He plays it all, and he plays it all with excellence. And what makes the performance work is that you buy that this character has all of those emotions. He's a multifaceted character inside of this action movie, and that all comes down to Denzel being able to sell all of it. From there, let's move on to the bad. The biggest negative for this film is that it feels like two movies in one. One movie is about McCall, the Lyft driver that helps people in his neighborhood, and the other movie is about McCall, the former CIA agent who has to investigate the murder of his friend. And the two stories don't really go together. They're just happening at the same time, and it makes the movie feel very episodic. And what I mean by episodic is that there's sequences in the movie that don't flow from what happened before and they don't affect what happens afterwards. It's just situations. He's driving down the road and gets a lift, and that leads him to trying to right some wrong. And then the movie goes on and does something totally different without really even acknowledging this little sequence that just happened. There's 2 or 3 of these episodes that you could cut out of the movie, throw them away, and it would not affect the story one single bit. And because of this, it makes it feel like the movie meanders around for about the first hour or so, and also throws the pacing way off with all these kind of start-stops with these mini stories that happen inside of the bigger story. And it also makes the movie about 20 or 30 minutes too long for this type of film. Likewise, the action for the most part seemed a little bit subpar for an Antoine Fuqua film. Seemed like there was a lot more kind of choppy action, more close-ups, as if they were trying to cover up for Denzel Washington not being able to do as much of his action as he's done in previous films. Granted, Denzel Washington is 63 years old. He looks great, but eventually age starts to catch up with you and you can't do all the things that you're able to do when you're younger. And I think this movie might have suffered a little bit because of that. One final thing, this movie has a lot of action movie logic. You've got to just accept that as kind of one of the story conceits, that there is action movie logic. And what I mean by that is that McCall doesn't face any consequences for the stuff that he does in this movie. Whether he's taking guys out, shooting people, killing people, there's no legal trouble, there's no blowback. He just gets away with doing all this sorts of vigilante work that the police tend to have a problem with, or other people's relatives tend to get mad at you when you do things like this. So you just kind of have to accept that with this movie, that it's old school 80s, 90s action movie logic, where as long as they're a virtuous action hero, they can get away with doing anything and not face the consequences for it. Overall, this is a movie that I did enjoy, but it had some pretty big issues. I would give this movie a B-, and on an entertainment level, I would go with a 7 out of 10. It's an enjoyable action movie, but not nearly as enjoyable as I wanted it to be because of those story issues and the pacing, and then the logic kind of pulled me out of it from time to time. If you're an action movie fan, I do recommend you go see this movie. Support the genre. We need more R-rated action movies. If you're not a fan of action movies, go ahead and skip this one. Anyway, that's my take on it, but what you have to say matters, so go ahead and join us down in the comments section. Tell us your take on this movie, the original Equalizer, all that fun stuff. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos, but the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies, I want to talk about movies with you. So please join me down in the comment section. Let's have a lively yet respectful conversation, and as always, thank you for watching.